Welcome to Chapter 5, Nutrition and Your Health. As you see right here, it says after this PowerPoint, you are what you eat. It should take on a whole new meaning. I hope that it's productive for us, and we're going to dive right into it. And what I want you to do now is write down 5 foods that you like, 5 that you don't, and then beside each one of those foods, give me a reason. And there is a reason for why I'm having you do this, but give me a reason why you like it or dislike it. Okay, so Google these 4 words and define them: nutrients, hunger, appetite, nutrition. We are going to dive deeper into this, but take a few minutes and get these down: nutrients, hunger, appetite, and nutrition. You do also see the concepts there. You do not have to write down the concepts, but that's what we're going to talk about in this section. Really what I want to focus on here is that there's 2 reasons for eating: a need, which is physical, and a desire, which is psychological. And I know this sounds really cliched, but it is a reality. The biggest thing about eating correctly is knowing how to, or recognizing how to know the difference between your psychological desire and your physical need. So here, if you'll write down the second bullet here while I'm talking, the first one talks about food and water being your 2 life necessities. I think we're all aware of that and know that. It says your body tells you through hunger when it needs food. Well, how does that work? And as you've already defined hunger as being the need for food, this is the physical reaction of that. Your stomach walls contract and they stimulate the nerve endings in your stomach. And then that in turn sends messages to your brain that your food supply is low. You then eat, your stomach walls relax, and you're no longer stimulated. You're full. That's also, I guess, one way to look at it from a physical standpoint is that's a stomach growl. That's why your stomach growls. It's letting you know that you're hungry and it's time to get some food. So a little more on this. Appetite's learned. It's not inborn. So now we talk about a psychological desire, and we talk about some environmental factors. So write down bullet 3 here. What is the desire to eat stemming from? Well, number 1 is culture. And you know, you can think about, what does that mean? Well, holidays. Think about what foods are associated with what holidays. Valentine's Day, of course, is candy. St. Patrick's Day for the adults is alcohol. You know, Thanksgiving, of course, all the traditional foods. You know, 4th of July is probably hot dogs and hamburgers. The Super Bowl might be, you know, chicken wings and nachos. Or if you go to a game, you know, if you go to a movie, you get popcorn. That's culture. And you just have to be careful to not get drawn into that too much, where everything is based around the food. And a lot of times that's in America, part of the problem is that's what it is. Everything's based around food. Parties and those kind of things are all based around eating. And so you just have to be careful to not get caught up in that stereotype. Your family and friends affect what you eat and how you eat. As being a teenager, you know, it's a little bit more limited because, you know, you're not buying the groceries, but we'll talk about this a little bit more later. But part of it is convincing, you know, your parents that they don't have to spend more money to eat healthy. You have to get rid of some stuff to get some of the other stuff that's more healthy, but that sort of balances out. And again, there's some things on the website under the nutrition tab already that you can click on that gives you some great food choices, even if it's fast food. Then it says ads, time, and money, and your emotions. You know, breakups can be horrible for a teenager, and you know, sometimes they respond the wrong way by eating too much ice cream, a whole pint of it or a whole tub of it. You know, it's not the right response, especially when it's late at night. That's going to sit on you. So those are the kind of things you got to be careful of and aware of, and avoid being influenced by others. Pay attention to quantity And, we'll talk about portion size in a second, but make sure something other than food's the focus of social situations. Again, as far as writing is concerned, just the third bullet right here is what we're really wanting to do, just this one right here. Okay, so make sure you get that down. Just a couple facts. I'll try to just check off what I would like you to write down. Other than that, just make sure that you're aware 6 of the 10 leading causes of death can be related to eating, directly or indirectly. 60% of what causes us to perish early is related to food. Good nutrition is essential to every stage of your life. Getting proper nutrition aids in providing energy, looking and feeling good, and staying healthy, or staying mentally alert. Here's the thing to write down, because you need to know this. You need to be aware of this and concentrate on the fact that next to infancy, I tell my football players a lot, right now is the fastest period of growth that you experience. So putting the right things in your body is going to fuel your body during one of the most important stages. That's motivation to eat right there in and of itself. As we move to the second section here, or section, excuse me, we're going to talk about carbs, as in carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Again, open up a new tab and Google these words and get some definitions so you'll have something to go by. Carbs or carbohydrates, glucose. You do not have to define glycogen. Proteins, yes. Amino acids, yes. Lipid, I'll discuss. You don't have to define that right now. Linoleic acid, either one, you don't have to define that. And then cholesterol, yes. And we'll talk about two different types of cholesterol, one good and one bad, as we move through this. Again, take a quick peek at the concepts so that you familiarize yourself. So I'll try to help you here. Again, define carbs, glucose, proteins, amino acids, and cholesterol. All right, so we've got two types of carbohydrates, as you may have saw in your definition: simple carbs and complex carbs. Simple carbs is what we'll discuss first. It's what you need less of. They're made of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. They're the body's preferred source of energy, so make sure you write that down, providing 4 calories per gram. There's two types, just mentioned, but we're really wanting to get 55 to 65% of our daily intake to be complex carbohydrates. So please jot this bullet down because it's going to come up big here later on. We're starting to plan our diet. Actually, I said a bad word. Diet's really not the right word to use when we're talking about this. We want to kind of stay away from that because that's not, that could be something that's a roller coaster. I can start and stop, start and stop. Rather look at it as a lifestyle or a pattern. If you can start using those words, and I'm a big believer in the right word uses. If you can start using those words, I think it's going to benefit you more than just saying diet, because we have a negative connotation that's associated with it, which means that it won't last, and so we'll try to stay away from that. Simple carbs are called sugars. They're present naturally in some fruits, fructose, milk, lactose, and veggies. Go ahead and write down, if you want to, just use the little equal sign. Fruits equals fructose, milk equals lactose. So we are looking at some of the labeling things. We can know what we're talking about there. Here's another one. Table sugar is sucrose. Of course, you want to stay away from that. Another good sugar is maltose. Right, so those are some of the sugars that you can be more commonly associated with. And then, of course, you know this, sugar, you don't have to write it down, but sugar can also be added to manufacture food. And that's where you get a lot of your candies and sweets. The second type of carbohydrate is a complex carb. They're called starches. So if you want to write down that complex carbs are called starches. They're found in great supply in rice and grains, and that's why you need more servings of that as we get to the pyramid later. We'll talk about that. But you can really find some good carbs in whole grains. They're called complex because their chemical makeup's more complex than sugars. I think that's something that goes without saying. You don't have to write that down. But they're made of many sugars linked together. So during digestion, the starches break down into sugars. Here we're looking at carbs role. Before they can be used and have any kind of role in the body, they got to be broken down into glucose, which we talked about earlier as a sugar. But that glucose that can't be used in storage, or is in storage in the liver, and then also in the muscles, which of course that's one reason that carbs is, especially complex carbs, can be useful in exercise. And then of course there's a lot of more fine tuning and refining of that, whether it be in anaerobic or aerobic exercise, but you can convert it back and use it again later. But if you eat more than you burn as glucose or store as glycogen, then it turns into fat, and that's not obviously not any good. So that's why we have to make sure that that 65% range is followed to complex versus simple carbs. And again, complex carbs are more easily, or not as easily broken down from a chemical standpoint, but they're more easily and more readily used by the body. Oh, as far as writing anything down, I really would like you to just write this last part, that the excess is stored as fat. You will appreciate this slide as you get older, I promise you. And I won't go into a lot of detail there. I'll spare you that. But fiber is important. It's vital. It's a complex carb. It can't be digested, and it can't be used as energy. So, what is it good for? Well, here's what you want to write down. Helpful in waste transportation. I'm not going to go into details, and I'm not going to draw anything here, but trust me when I tell you, it's a good thing. Eating enough of it may reduce the risk of cancer or heart disease and help control diabetes. Where do you find it? Here's another thing to write down. Bulky food that's lower in fat and calories. And then if you want more fiber, then eat lots of fruits, vegetables, and grains. Make sure that you jot that down. Moving on to proteins, one of my favorites. Look at all of this. This is pretty incredible. And again, just jot this down real quick. Muscle, bone, connective tissue, teeth, skin, blood, and vital organs all contain proteins. Just like carbs, proteins are 4 calories per gram, so put that over the margin if you want to. Just like carbs, excess protein is converted to fat. Here's another thing, a very important thing to write down. Proteins are made of building blocks called amino acids. And specifically, your body makes 11 of the 20 of those amino acids. So that means the other 9 you got to get from food. So whatever you eat, if it's got those 9 amino acids, then you're talking about it. We'll get to this in the next slide. Being able to eat a complete protein, which is obviously very good for you. Incomplete protein is not bad. It's just not a saturated or trans fat versus non-saturated fat or unsaturated fat, kind of argument or anything like that. However, it is good when you can eat a complete protein, and I'll give you some examples in just a minute. So as I said, a complete protein is a food that contains all the essential, which would be the other 9 amino acids that the body needs in the proper amounts. You don't have to copy down this definition, but just to give you an example of what a complete protein would be looking, and you guys or even ladies that are working out, that are on a strict eating plan or pattern, you're looking for stuff that's got protein in it. Look no farther than fish, meat. Of course, if it's lean, it's better. Poultry, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt. Your dairy products, you want to kind of do your best to keep away from the lactose too much. It's not going to hurt you guys as much if you're exercising the right way, but these are the things that contain complete proteins. Now the good news is that even though there are incomplete proteins, you can combine foods to make them complete. And since you're paperless here, I'll give you a perfect example. There's a reason PB&J is such a hot ticket item for lunch, is because if you put peanut butter and bread together, then you're putting two incomplete proteins together to form a complete protein. So that's one thing that you can look at. There are other cultures that have sort of developed the same thing, and just one more to sort of mention, a tortilla shell and some refried beans even is an example of putting two incomplete proteins together to make a complete protein. And I'm sure that's why, well, it may not be why it's popular. It's probably popular because you add meat, cheese, and a lot of other things, and maybe it's not quite as healthy, but it does do the job for forming a complete protein. Just write down on this that foods that lack some of the essential amino acids are what are known as incomplete proteins. Right here, you can sort of cut it off. So moving through protein's role, I'm not going to have you write anything right here. Just want to go over a couple things that proteins can do for you. We've already talked about amino acids, and proteins contain those. And what makes that so important is they help you grow new body tissue during most important stages of your life, and also helps to form new proteins that replace damaged or worn out body cells. Well, you find proteins in enzymes and hormones and antibodies to regulate many body processes. And I would normally touch more on antibodies, but there's something that we can talk about later on when we get to the infectious diseases portion of our of our class, and I can talk more about antibodies then and protein's role there. So it's a misconception that you don't need any fat, or that all fat is bad. Matter of fact, we do need fat, not just want it, or crave it. We need it, just in moderation. Gram for gram, fats deliver nearly twice the energy of carbohydrates or proteins. You know how I think proteins and carbs were at 4 per, and so nearly twice is really wrong. It's more than double. Let me change my pen color here so we can see better. Sorry, bear with me. So it's not nearly, it's more than twice. Write that down too. When the book that I worked off of came out, it was either saturated or unsaturated. We know that now they've added trans fat to that list of categorization, which is the worst. Unsaturated fat is the good kind of fat. Saturated fat you need in moderation, and then trans fat you don't need any of. I'll try to detail that a little bit more later, but definitely want to stay away from that. The good news is the FDA's really cracking down on food companies to make sure that they identify their foods that have trans fats in them. Saturated fats are called that because they contain all hydrogen atoms. They're saturated with those. Found in animal fats and tropical oils, also high in beef, pork, egg yolks, and dairy foods. Saturated fats are usually solid at room temperature. High intakes are associated with heart disease. So jot down just that last part right there. High intakes are associated with heart disease. And then this second bullet. You can tell when I first did this PowerPoint, I was trying to be cool. That's a failure. Unsaturated fat is when it misses one or more pairs of hydrogen atoms. It's better for you than saturated fat. So you really want to make sure that that you get plenty of, well, I don't know, plenty might be a stretch, but you want it in your daily food intake, especially if you're properly exercising. Write this down, and then I think it's important that you understand this too. It is actually a reduced risk of heart disease when you're talking about consuming unsaturated fat. Vegetable oil, which is one reason a lot of people say it's good to cook in, because it contains more unsaturated fat than saturated fat. So again, we already know that fats are energy boosters. You might put this down because we're going to get to this in a second. They carry vitamins A, D, E, and K in your blood. I think you don't have to jot this down if you already know it, but they add flavor to food. help satisfy hunger since they take longer to digest than others. This is interesting. It's not anything you have to write down because it's on every food guide label that you have. I always stare at it in the morning when I'm eating cereal. Teenage girls require about 66 grams per day. Boys are about 84. That's average. That's right in the middle. Again, this is always, I think, gets a negative connotation, but it's not necessarily the case. It doesn't have to, at least. There's two types. One is bad, one is not. Your body needs cholesterol, but it can make it. It's found in foods, or only in foods of animal origin: meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and dairy. Write that down. Saturated fats raise cholesterol levels and lead to heart disease. So there's two types here. HDL is a high density lipoprotein, and then LDL is low density. That's the bad kind, and HDL is the good kind. So when you're doing, and I know a lot of you have seen the documentary Super Size Me in different classes, maybe middle school or here, but when you were looking at his readouts, that was what was scary, is his HDL, and the doctor even refers to it that way. Really skyrocketed after a couple weeks of being on the all McDonald's diet. So now we're moving into section 3. And in section 3, we're going to talk about vitamins, minerals, and water, all important. Here's the definition for vitamin. I'm going to take a second and write it down. It's compounds that help regulate vital processes, including digestion, absorption, and metabolism of other nutrients. Little known fact, you not necessarily have to write this down, but vitamins do not supply calories, but they can help speed up energy, so they kind of act as a catalyst. There's 13 vitamins that help you become more nutritious, but out of those 13, the only one made by the body is vitamin D. So that means, unlike amino acids where it's 11 out of 20, with all of these 13 vitamins, 12 of them you got to go get. To break vitamins up and make them a little bit easier to identify, there's two groups: water soluble and fat soluble. And don't write that down yet because we're going to get to that next. So here are the water soluble vitamins: vitamin C, and all the B complex vitamins, which is B1, B2, niacin, B6, folic acid, B12, and pantothenic acid. You can jot down a couple of these just for examples. And then I did a little more with the fat-soluble vitamins to tell you kind of where you can find them because there's less of them. A, D, E, and K. They're kind of cross-referenced here. A is in milk, green veggies, carrots, deep orange fruits, and liver. Vitamin D you find in fortified milk, eggs, fortified breakfast cereal, sardines, salmon, and beef. Vitamin E is in vegetable oils, legumes, nuts, seeds, and wheat germ. And vitamin K is in spinach, broccoli, eggs, liver, cabbage, tomatoes, and intestinal bacteria, which I would stay away from. Maybe get probiotics or something can help you with that. Jot down the 4 and maybe one example of each. All right, moving on to minerals. They are inorganic substances. By the way, this is a definition, so write this down. That the body can't make, but they can act as catalysts by regulating many vital body processes. This is a pretty important slide because it really knocks out everything that you need to know about minerals. There are vital minerals and trace minerals. The trace minerals first. I give you some examples here: iron, iodine, and copper, which I'm sure you've heard of before. The key to knowing what you need to know about this is that the body only needs it in very small amounts to satisfy it acting as catalyst. The vital minerals, however, the body needs in larger amounts. And you can understand that when you look at one of the examples here, which is calcium, which helps develop and maintain bone strength, gives bone structure, prevents bone loss and fractures. Obviously, there's a lot of dairy products that you can get calcium from. It's not the only place, but a good place. You just got to make sure that you are aware aware of the amount of fat and sugar that you're putting in when you're taking those in. But there's ways to regulate that. And then all important thing to people that exercise or athletes, electrolytes. The good news is I think your generation knows more about them than any, but they contain, or sodium, chloride, and potassium are 3 mineral electrolytes. Why are they called electrolytes? By the way, write this down. Because they are electrically charged in the body fluids. So when you're thinking about your Powerades and Gatorades, they're all going to contain these in high amounts. Only little side note I'll give you right here, and I try not to break off on these tangents too often, but I was just talking to a doctor the other day, and he was talking about Gatorade. You know, water's still the best thing, and it's coming up, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but especially as you pre-hydrate before any kind of activity. Gatorade is okay. It's just, you know, when they went into the series G1, G2, G3, G2 is actually a lot better because a lot of doctors will tell you to dilute Gatorade to keep the sugar content down and keep your stomach from being unsettled. Speaking of food, we just dropped some. But Gatorade's overall is good, but you just got to be careful, especially during performance. It could be unsettling to your stomach with the amount of sugar. It's better probably post than anything else when you're trying to regain your electrolytes. I'll give you some examples of what you want to make sure of, but again, you can't beat water. Water makes up the greatest percentage in your body. That number is about 70. So you can tell that it's pretty vitally important. It regulates everything. I don't think there's anything on this slide that's not important enough to write down. Carries nutrients to and transports waste away from your cells. It lubricates your joints and mucous membranes. When you sweat, it helps you cool down and prevents rising internal heat. For those people that say internal combustion is impossible, if you don't drink water and you continue to exercise and you continue to become overheated, you might have to eat your words, and I wouldn't test that. Of course, you know I'm joking from that standpoint, but there's no joking when it comes to heat strokes and those kind of things. And again, I go back to athletes need to make sure that they're consuming water pre, during, and post. And pre is the most important of those three. I had a doctor tell me the other day, and I'm just going to be blunt with you. He said, if your athletes aren't peeing 2 to 3 times before lunch, then they're not drinking enough water. So make sure that you, and if you don't, look at this what I just checked. If you're not just a big drink water kind of person, you better get over it. But another way to offset it a little bit is eat fruit and vegetables. 75% of water is what makes fruit and vegetables, or water makes 75% of fruit and vegetables. So eat that to offset it. That can help you. This says drink 13 8-ounce glasses daily. That's a little bit skewed because it changes a little bit with your weight. But one thing you can do is take your weight and divide it by 2, and then you can get your amount of ounces, and then divide your cups into it. For me, 160 pounds, obviously divided by 2 is 80, and so I'm looking at trying to get 10 cups a day in. So that's quite a bit, you know, when you're looking at 8 ounces being a cup. That's quite a bit. You just got to make sure that you're drinking it all day long. All right, so now we're going to move into the pyramid. The pyramid's been all over the place. It was this way at one time. It's since moved into a thing that they wanted to personalize a little bit more, they being the government, called My Pyramid. And you can look that up on Google right now and do it. The problem with that was it got a little bit too complicated for certain groups. It wasn't everyone friendly. And so they sort of went back to this one. So I'm leaving it alone. But again, I mean, feel free to do that if you really want something that's detailed. There's better ways to go about that, and I'm going to talk about that at the end of this chapter with your assignment and project. But for now, here's the pyramid. So there's 6 food groups. Obviously, we've already talked about that in its entirety, going over the different nutrients. Now we'll break these down: grains, vegetables, fruits, meat, milk or dairy, and fats. So you want to work from the bottom up. Your size of recommended servings mirrors size in the pyramid, so that's why the fats are at the tip. Jot these things down. You can actually draw yourself a nice, pretty pyramid and start sectioning it off, and put this in here, and then maybe draw your little arrows from the side to tell you how much are in each. Your serving range is broad because the needs vary depending on age, gender, physical condition, body size, and activity level. So, I think my dog's saying hi. Apologies. But I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second when I'm going through the serving sizes. The first group in the pyramid is the grain group, and it is the most important. That's why it's the base of the pyramid. I don't know if I should say the most important. You've got to get the most of it, especially at your time in your life. It's extremely important. Write down that it includes grains, breads. It includes breads, cereals, rice, and pastas. It's the grain group. Write down the nutrients include complex carbs, fiber, iron, and B vitamins. And then 6 to 11 is a broad range. I tell teenagers to stay on the upper side of that range as long as they're making sure that the carbs are complex. If you're doing that and you're exercising, you're going to be fine. Next, you have the fruit group. You know what fruits are. The nutrients you get from them are probably more beneficial for you to know right now. Vitamins A and C, magnesium, potassium, fiber, and carbs. 2 to 4 servings daily. Again, upper side of that's fine as long as you're active. The vegetables, you get vitamins A, C, and K from vegetables. You get calcium from vegetables. See, I told you it's not just dairy. You get iron, you get magnesium, you get fiber, which is extremely important, which we already know, and you get carbs. And again, you know what vegetables are. I hope you're still eating them, even if mom's not making them for you for lunch now. You still got that opportunity. And then you want to get 3 to 5 servings of vegetables daily. If you can get 5, especially if you can get at least 1 to 2 green leafy vegetables, that would be awesome. Meat group, you've got beef, poultry, fish, bean, eggs, and nuts. Say, why does nuts belong with all these animals? And it's not so much about that as much as it is about the amount of protein that is available in nuts, which is quite a bit. So jot those 2 things down: vitamins B, iron, and phosphorus, and then 2 to 3 servings a day. And if you're wanting to build muscle, obviously, as long as you're drinking the right amount of water, that protein can help with that. We've already kind of discussed that. And the dairy group, which includes milk products, also yogurt and cheese. You get protein out of dairy. You obviously get calcium, vitamins A, D, and B2, and phosphorus, and 2 to 3 servings a day of that. I would not go above that, and I wouldn't go below it either. Try to find it. Just make sure that you're not finding high-fat dairy foods. And then last and least, the fat group. It includes oils and sweets. You get carbohydrates out of it. Just make sure you're using it sparingly. No trans fat. So I jotted down a few eating tips here. Choose plenty of grain products. If you've gotten this written down somewhere else, don't write it again. Choose foods low in fat and saturated fat, especially 0 trans fat. Choose an eating style moderate in sugars. And if it's grain sugars, that's perfectly fine as long as you're exercising. We're talking about sucrose and some of those. And choose an eating style moderate in salt and sodium. And again, if it's recovery electrolytes, that's okay. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day because you go 10 to 12 hours between supper and breakfast, which is the biggest gap between meals. Write those 2 things down. Research proves breakfast acts as a fuel, makes us mentally and physically sharper in the late morning. So on a block schedule, that's first or second period. In the traditional schedule we're in right now, could be anything first through fourth. So, regardless, it's very important. You don't have to write that down. Eat a variety of foods, include several servings from different food groups. And again, most important, just eat breakfast. And I'm even going to go, and I've heard nutritionists even say this before, but I'll go outside the box a little bit here to tell you that if you're active and you really just can't stand some of the breakfast foods, drink your breakfast. Drink a smoothie, drink a protein shake, do something like that. Or even more outside the box, if you do crave something that's sweet, like a Pop-Tart or a donut or something like that, you guys are going to burn it. You're going to burn it if you're active at all and you're going to school. So if you have a choice between that or nothing, eat. As we finish things off here, we're going to talk about being a smart consumer. I'm actually not going to have you identify these terms and look them up on Google, because I know this has been long for you, but I'm going to kind of walk you through each one of these, all right? Okay, the most important part for me about being a smart consumer is knowing how to read a label. All nutrition facts labels help you find good sources of nutrients. They compare nutrients and calories among similar products, and they choose foods that meet special dietary needs. Every label contains serving sizes, servings per container, calories per container, and from fat. You can read the rest of that. One thing I want to make sure that you understand, though, is the serving size and serving per container. Because if you look at that wrong, you may think that you're not doing yourself too big a disservice. I think bags of chips are a good way to look at it. Some people look at it and think that, wow, that's not too bad. This bag of chips only has 3 grams of fat, or fill in the blank for whatever it is you're trying to avoid, and then you miss it, and the serving size says 3 chips, and you eat 43 chips. And so, you have to do a lot of math there, and then you get doing the math, you're like, uh-oh, that's not good. So just make sure that you see that first on the label when you're trying to identify whether something is, and it doesn't mean you can't eat it. It just means at that point you might want to be careful about when you eat it and how much you eat. I think this is a pretty cool quote. It says, reverse a typical American eating pattern. You got to think about medieval times now. And instead eat like a king for breakfast, a prince for lunch, and a pauper for dinner. Because what we do right now is exactly the opposite. We don't eat breakfast, and then we eat huge for supper. And that's really not the best way to do it. Honestly, I'm the only thing I would kind of throw the wrench in this quote is, all the research that's being done now is, especially if you're active, if you can eat 4 and 5 small meals a day, I think that's even better. And then you sort of track it back throughout the day. As long as you're drinking water, I think that might be the best approach. All right, so last but not least are your assignments for the week. First, you already know, I told you today in class or early in the week in class, that you need to take notes over what I've given you on here. Second, and let me pull this up while we're talking here, is a food log. I want 3 days of meals, okay? You can either do that by the good old-fashioned way of writing it down in the notebook, or you can do it by app. Before I show you this app, what that means is you get 3 squares down on paper, breakfast, lunch, and supper, and then the snacks that you have in between, and the amount that you drink. Now, the serving sizes are not that hard, especially if you do it on the app. If you don't know when you're doing it on notebook paper, then just be descriptive. And if there's any kind of discrepancy, I can talk you through it when you turn it in. I can say, hey, that's equal to, 4 ounces is equal to 1 serving, or so on and so forth. A nutrition label can also help you with that. But I'm not going to grade you down for, your amounts or anything like that, as long as you're descriptive for what you write down. If you do the app, all right, get in the app store and search My Plate. All right, now there's 2 or 3 of them. I think one of them says My Plate Calorie Tracker. That may do it too, but when I did it and I downloaded it, it was free. I just searched the app store and went My Plate. I downloaded the app. All right, so you click on it, and it's going to open this up. All right, you're going to have to profile yourself real quick. That'll come up first. You don't have to get push notifications or anything like that. And then you're going to get breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack. It also has a place for you to log your water and your exercise. So everything I'm asking for is right here. It is so easy. When you get into it, it'll say, like for breakfast, you click on breakfast, it'll come up and say, what did you eat today? And you start typing it in, and I promise you, it's probably going to come up in some form or fashion. And then you log it. You also have a place where you can actually scan food. I haven't done that yet. If you want to try that, that's fine. Tell me how it goes. This is kind of new for me too. But this is a great way to get you started on long term. All right. I'm doing a 24-day Advocare challenge. They have their own app too, but this one is more probably suited to what you need and what I might need once I come off of this. It will keep track of calories. If you enter the food, it can do that for you. All right. And if you'll use the auto calorie goal, that's probably the best option. But that's not what I'm looking for. I just want you to have a place to log food. All right, so we're good on that. My plate is what you're looking up, okay? On the extra credit, if you'll bring in any nutrition label, it can be a box top from a cereal. Make sure your box is through. Don't get your parents mad at me. A candy wrapper, a bag of chips, anything that you can find. Some box that's got it on there or whatever. And not only that, but if I'm gonna give you extra credit points, you got to earn them. You got to come in and you tell me about the food. All right, serving size, servings per container. Is it a healthy food? Moderately healthy? Not healthy? Why? Just not everything, but just the basics about it. And I'll try to get you some points that way. So both of these, the notes are due at the end of the week. All right, but both of these are due on the 13th, okay, which is next Wednesday in 2015, next Wednesday on the 13th. So if you'll bring that in, then I'll try to give you credit for that. So if you've got any questions, just see me in class. All right, thank you.